All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Guten Morgen. Buen dia. Bonjour. Namaste. Welcome to Spring Boot Conference 24th first session. I hope you all are excited as I am. Before we get into all the details, let me introduce myself. I am Jatin Makhija, and we'll see what I have done so far. The topic of my presentation is revving up the good old Samaritan Spring Boot admin. Well, I'm an engineering leader at Deutsche Telekom Digital Labs. If you have been in Europe far long and been using T-Mobile as your, let's say, tariff partner, and been using its mobile, web applications, broadband, TV, and you're wondering how it's working so well, well, because I'm one of the engineers behind that team, driving into its digitalization. So our aim is to become the best digital telco. My previous stints have been in two startups. One is now the second largest OTA in India, which is Ixigo. And another one is VWO, which is Visual Web Optimizer. It's one of the powerful A/B testing tools. They also support multivariate, heat maps, and whatnot. I'm a maker-breaker of applications. And yes, that's me last year in Girona, trying to have a lot of gelatos as much as I can because it was too hot out there. I love to travel. This is my third time in Barcelona. And I'm hoping this time I can see Camp Nou in and out. Twice was not a charm. Let's see this time how it goes. So, as we move forward, this is an AI-generated image of, let's say, me and some of my colleagues who have been struggling with logs, applications on production, which are not really working fine. They are having a lot of issues in managing and monitoring them. So, this was until we met Spring Boot admin. So before I go more into the details, can I have a simple show of hands? How many of you have actually worked on Spring Boot admin? Okay, quite a few. And anyone who has done an extensive, let's say, over-the-top work on Spring Boot admin, as in extended some classes and whatnot, just to set the expectation right from the session? Okay. Then I think I have a mixed bunch of enthusiasts as well as the pro guys on Spring Boot admin. So what is Spring Boot admin? Spring Boot admin is a Spring Boot application in itself, which is used to manage and monitor Spring Boot applications. Now, Spring Boot admin can actually do a lot of things. It can manage and help you with UI-based monitoring as first thing. Of course, there are too many tools now, but this is one of the legends. It also helps with heap dumps. It can help you with monitoring your caches, what all caches are going on in your application. Metrics, we'll see how we can quickly check the metrics at different parts. It also has cloud-native Kubernetes support. And of course, you could play this and that and work with the security aspects as well. Now, for those of you who are, let's say, new to the Spring Boot admin, now, there are basically, as we saw, the very favorite application, which is you go to start.spring.io. You can actually download. So from Spring Boot 3, you could actually download the Spring Boot admin server as well. Post that, what you can do is you just have to download it and import it into your favorite IDE. It could be IntelliJ, it could be Eclipse, it could be any, even VI is fine. So once you have done that, you have to add an annotation called enable admin server. Once you're done through, you can optionally set a port because usually 8080 is like quite busy, right? Just like we all are. After that, you can run the application. Once you run the application, you would actually see, let's say, a sad smiley face over there because you're not really managing anything right now. It's just an application which has booted up. Now, with the server, it's really important to connect the clients. So now a client could be your existing application, or you could also, again, go to Spring.io and then launch a sample application. Now, the important part is in that as well, you need to add a dependency, which is your admin starter client. Now, this is the client which tells that, OK, I'm a client, and now I can talk to the server, which is Spring Boot server. But that's not the case. After that, you need to define where that URL is, whether it's behind a firewall, whether it's having a URL, or it's on your local host. Once you're through, you would see in a couple of seconds, you will see that there is an application which is up and running. And I'm going to demonstrate that. I'll not take a lot of time in going and downloading all those jars and whatnot. I will have some trust issues with the Wi-Fi at different places. So I have downloaded those files for you. And let's go to the code and see how we can quickly start a server. So this is my application. Let's go to the Spring Boot server. All right. So for the simplicity's sake, I'm using the port 1990 because 8080 is like usually busy. Let's start. Spare me if there are any errors because I changed certain things in the database in the application. But I think it's good to go. Once the application has started, you could actually go and see that smiling face over there on the local host. Yeah, it's here. So this is the Spring Boot client server. Now it's time, let's boot up one client as well. So this is a sample application. Let me boot that real quick. All right, so we have our very own Spring IO application, which is booted up. We will dive into it, how we have been using these applications to monitor and manage different microservices. We will also see how we are leveraging it. We are just not, let's say, using the vanilla of it, but we have wrapped up functions, we have wrapped up automation around it, and we see how it's done. All right. So moving on, what's up next? So as I mentioned, it's not just going to be about vanilla Spring Boot admin. It's about how we are leveraging at every other point, be it log management, feature flags, automation. Everyone wants automation, right? Of course, health checks and monitoring. So it's really easy to do monitoring and health checks using Spring Boot admin. We'll also cover heap dumps and thread dumps with a pinch of salt with respect to its impact on the application. We'll also see how we have leveraged timeouts and TTL. And last but not the least, there are myths going on around the scale of this application, and we'll see how we are able to scale or we are not able to scale at different point of time. All right, so as I said, we will be talking more and more on leveraging the client, the server, and which will first of all include a very important aspect, which is your log management. Now, every now and then, it's a fact, right? You have, and I don't wish that for you, but you get bugs, you get incidents. I don't wish you get those for the next 2 days. Otherwise, you won't be sitting out here. You would be just hustling to a page and then trying to debug it. But my question is, do you like bugs? Do you love incidents? Well, in both the cases, you need logs. Now, it's seldom that you have logs or you can improvise on the logs, but in such a situation when you have been working day and night and you get an incident and you are just struggling, hey, how can I get more information? Now, that information is pricey. That information is hard to get at times. But what if I tell you it's really easy if you have a client-server model in which you are using Spring Boot server? Now, that's what it says, no logs, no problem, because that's where Spring Boot server is there to rescue. So it can get you logs in like a couple of seconds. You can change from info to trace in like blink of an eye. Let's see if we can really do that. Does it live to its expectation? So let's, yeah, my screen is here. All right, let's go to the loggers. So loggers are interesting. You could actually log anything and everything, but you have to be really precise and very careful on what you log. Now, if you want to have a class level logs, you could actually filter out which class you want to have logs on. Let's say you want to have trace level logs on the main application, but debug level logs on the, let's say, JDBC client, you can do that. But if you want overall, just, we are all in hurry when it comes to issues and fixing of the bugs. So let's see if I can do a trace. Now it says red, of course it should. Let's go here. Now, you can see from info to debug to trace in like seconds. So this is how it really helps you get the logs when you absolutely need them. And you don't really wait too long for contracting, for taking a build to production. Of course, you have to put those correct log information at places. But this is, let's say, helping you deep dive into how you can actually get logs and logs in, let's say, real time. So, no deployments, happy customers. If you want to debug any issues, you can actually go and do it really quick. Now, there is an important aspect as well. Since you have logs and you are, say, racing it up whenever you want, whenever you wish, but logs have a cost. So they have costs in twofold. One is an infrastructure cost, which we as developers seldom ignore. It's okay, I'm just logging something. What does it cost? But going from info to trace, it's like a roller coaster in terms of cost, because you're printing a lot of things. And secondly, you have to be sensitive about logs. So when I say sensitive, these questions are all valid. Is it safe to print all these logs? Is it the right thing to do on production? Is it GDPR compliant? So the favorite of all, right, 6, 7 years back, if you're not GDPR compliant, be ready to shed 25 million euros or 4% of your revenue, whichever is less or more, I mean. Now, the very simple answer to all of this is, sorry, messed it up. Yes. So yes, it is safe, but don't forget to revert. So, and I'll do that really quick because I put the application to trace logs. That's not really healthy, neither for me, neither for the presentation, not for my laptop. Third, which is mask the PII. So whenever you are having any logs, you have to mask them. Whether you are doing debug, whether you are tracing, you just cannot print any personal identifiable information. Because if you are doing that, God bless you, I really don't want you to do that because it's, let's say, it's the most biggest risk in security. So imagine if someone is printing your numbers and emails, it's really bad, right? It's really bad. Now, since I was giving a lot of knowledge on it, I also should go back and do this, right? Let's not keep it when it's not required. All right, that was about logs and how you can see that you can leverage and print them whenever you want to, even on production if you want, but yes, it's tricky, and we'll cover how we can leverage and effectively do that. Feature flags. So you can't live without them, but they will exist. So in all the modern applications, or let's say enterprise applications, not every customer or consumer wants all the features. So you got to toggle, you have to create features, but you also have to create feature flags. Now with feature flags, it's really important that you need to know how to manage them. Now building feature flags with Spring has been really smooth. You have annotations, you have your conditional statements, you have class-based things and whatnot. But the problem is not with just building feature flags. And this is also a tale of our, let's say, product owners. So in multi-tenant applications, there are different users, there are different segments whom you have to cater for feature flags. So it's not that just you're toggling a feature on and off, it's done. No, it's actually helping you segment your users. It also helps inherently in quality assurance. It also helps you control your production. So imagine you wanted to ship a feature, you have just made all the regression stuff done, but you need to hold on. You need to see if it's production ready or not. And that's where feature flags come up. And thanks to our product owners, they always emphasize that, hey, please have a feature flag. Now, we always have a love-hate relationship with the product owners, so we can't code without them, without their vision. But we don't really want them with us when we are coding. Otherwise, they just keep spamming with a lot of feedbacks and feedbacks and feedbacks. So no hard feelings, but yes, if you have a lot of features, you end up creating a lot of tech debt as well. The features which you're not using, so you need to see how you can actually refactor things, and I think there's a talk today about how you can actually refactor things. I'm pretty excited about that. Now, The real problem, as I said, it's not the feature. It's about having a lot of features and not be able to validate all of them. So imagine there is a feature which is Boolean, which is true and false. It's fine, you can do that. What if it has an enum value? What if I am supporting an application for, let's say, enterprise, small level enterprise, very small level enterprise. So every application, they have their application levels and they create feature flags around it. Now, how to test these 100 of features which are not mutually exclusive? It's actually a nightmare, either for a POA or QA, managing the configs, redeploying them. Someone messes up, you end up having a bad day because someone just messed up the configuration, right? And you have deployed it. It takes a couple of minutes, sometimes minutes or hours as well to debug certain things. Now, how Spring Boot client and server helps us with feature flags? I'm going to demonstrate two use cases. One is about a legacy discount system for an application. Second one is actually a little boring. It's a recorded demo because of all the VPN constraints. Now, in my application, you would see that there is a, let's say, there's an application which is going to sell phones. So you would see there is a screen which is talking about iPhone 14 Pro, but there is a new initiative. So everyone is trying to be very, having a less carbon footprint, right? So we launched a feature which is about exchanging mobile phones. Now for that, we partnered up with a third-party application. Now what they do is they really help you provide different questions and different discounts depending upon the locale. Now managing locale for a third party, it's tricky because they have their, let's say, API rulebook. You can't really change. You might be thinking, why not just use a VPN and mock it up? But the thing is, it's a third-party application. So you have to go by a little bit of their rules because otherwise they would end up creating issues in different places. Let me show that first demo in which I will be opening a recorded one. Okay, so this is the application wherein you see that there is a iPhone screen. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start an exchange offer wherein I'll be typing about my old phone. Yeah, it's an old phone. We'll be typing and keying in the IMEI ID. Of course, this is a test one. It's not mine, so my data is safe. Now, what you see is that the questions are the things which are asked in German. So those of you who understand German, you would be able to read what it says. So there are things which are coming up in German. Now, if I move to a different locale, let's say I move to UK or I move to a country wherein, let's say, English is more popular. Now, in order to handle that, we can actually use Spring Boot server in order to manage the configurations. Now, let's see in this how I will be switching to a Spring Boot server. So this is a Spring Boot admin server, wherein I can find the property, which is my locale versus language trade-in.de. We'll be picking that up and patching it up on the fly. So this is one of the features of Spring Boot admin. You can alter the properties which are refreshable. So in my case, I'm going to do it with English. Let's update it, and then you have to refresh the context. It takes a couple of seconds or multiple seconds depending upon the, let's say, how you have deployed your application on the cloud. That's a tiny loader over there. Okay, so I'm in the same application. I go over there, I take a simple refresh to make sure that my context is refreshed or not. Let me speed that up a little. Okay, so we start with the exchange program again. We click over there, and then there will be a model which would be asking me about, again, enter your phone details, enter your IMEI. And since you have refreshed it, what you will notice is, without any single deployment, without any application downtime, you have actually figured out a way to refresh the application with respect to what you intended it to be. So you have the English text now, you have the integration talking to the partner, which is giving you now optimum questions about your device, because in different countries there could be different mechanism with respect to how the delivery guy would pick that phone up from your place. How is your screen? Is it broken? Is it partially broken? It's not at all broken. So they have different ways to answer and subsidize your different things. Now, as I said, whenever there is a matter of logs, whenever it's a matter of a config, it's also good that you should reset the configuration. Now, this also means if you think that, hey, if I hand it over to a product owner, they might mess up my application. They might just type ENG instead of English, and that will make the application go crazy. Well, yes, for a while. But the beauty of Spring Boot server and client application is you just have to restart it once. All these changes are temporary for you to validate, but not really to keep them indefinitely. So once you restart the application, it's all good. So as I have now restarted, I have changed the configuration again. You see, it's again coming in German, Entschuldigung. Now, this was one demo wherein we are able to change the application behavior. Now imagine the next case, which is more geeky for all of us, as I can sense. So let's say there is an application which is giving me employee data. Now, my product owner wanted me to have a connectivity with the legacy ecosystem and give every legacy user a 15% discount. Now, that's a very easy thing to do. You just give a discount to your legacy users. Now, as I said, developing features, not crazy, it's easy. The point is how you can actually validate them. Now, with this application, what we did is that I made a feature flag, and I can talk to legacy immediately whenever I want. So without redeploying, without creating a mess of configurations with respect to the, let's say, databases, what I did is, let's say, so this is an output which is coming from the current application. It's Sarah, Aisha, Mohan, and Zara. Now, let's go to the Spring Boot. Let's again go to the environment. Let's do it in real time. So Spring Boot IO, legacy. Let's say I set it as true. Let's say it's confirmed. Let's say if it does. There you go. So within a basic property change, you can actually switch your system to legacy and whatnot. And this is not the end. This is just a few examples wherein you can leverage Spring Boot server a lot. A lot what you could imagine it could do. I know, as I said, too many applications, but every application is, a charm in its own way. So that was about the demo of the feature flags. Let's move on. What's next? What's new? All right, yes, it's everywhere. All right, so what do we get? We get happy product owners. So no product owner will now actually come to you and say, hey, please deploy this for me. Please do this change for me. You could actually hand over login credentials to them, and they can manage on an environment which they could control. So no more wait times, no more deployments, refresh in blink of an eye, and of course, increased test coverage. So whenever you are launching anything, you have to make sure the coverage is good. Now with these things, you can actually leverage. So the case of legacy, right? Now I can, every time when I make a release, I can say, hey, I can actually test it out. And it doesn't take, let's say, infinity. It's really quick. All right, then very next thought which comes up is, hey, you have been doing a lot of tests, you're doing a lot of time in manually verifying a lot of stuff. Why can't you just automate it? Well, your thought is right. You could actually do that. And that's one of the things which I'll be demonstrating today, that how we have leveraged Spring Boot in order to, let's say, automate the Spring Boot admin itself. Sounds like Christopher Nolan Inception, but that's what the case is. So Spring Boot application in itself is a Spring Boot application. Spring Boot server is an application. Now, what our SDETs, what our team has done is that they have automated their REST APIs. Let's take a sneak peek into the architectural design, then I'll also demonstrate how it's done and how we have been executing it so well. So this is a classic, let's say, test framework wherein you have the source code coming from, let's say, GitLab or GitHub. You have Jenkins as a CI/CD. In this, you see that there is a, let's say, test scripts which are written in Selenium, REST Assure, HTML client. So there are both web automation as well as API automation. What we have smartly introduced is Spring Boot admin in the middle. So this is going to give a loop of feedback to the application. Now, our test will actually control how the application should look like in case of multi-tenant applications, because you need to verify a lot of things. So once you toggle the feature, it will actually go and test that and then revert it again, depending upon how you want to control it. I also have a quick demo around it. So the application which you saw previously doing the manual changes, now let's see if automation can do the justice which we all care about and which we all need to work about. So as you can see, this is Chrome being controlled by automated test software. So it will again go to the section which will help you select your phone. It will again ask for, let's say, the details. But in between, what will happen is, so here you see that it's again coming up in German, which is the first primary language of this web application. Now, in that demo, I demonstrated that I'll go and edit the properties and do that self. Now, this is what we actually did in automation. So we wrote certain classes, we certain wrappers around it. We can get the configs, we can patch the configs on the fly, and you can see the test is running. Nothing has changed from my end, and there is a different screen now, different data, because we dynamically patched, we automated the Spring Boot server itself. So we analyzed what are the APIs going on, we created those getter setters and mappings, and we automated that. Now that was, let's say, automation. So this is, again, a use case. You could leverage it for your APIs. You could do it a lot more coverage. You could increase your integration tests and whatnot. Now, what do we get out of automation? So this is a classic answer, right? I have increased the efficiency and efficacy of my tests, early detection of defects, increased accuracy, ease of regression, of course, high scalability. So you can now ship with confidence that, hey, yes, I've got you covered. Automation got you covered. It's really easy to say, hey, we have 90% test cases. We have a test pyramid in which we are going from shift left or right to left and so on. But you really need some integration tests. You need a handful of UI tests as well. And this is where you could leverage them a lot. Moving from the automation, now the core wherein Spring Boot server came in. So it's about metrics and monitoring. So metrics and monitoring actually come up already as default when you install it. So if you have installed it, you already would have played with the metrics part of it. Now, to do that, you could actually check the status and uptime. You could check any scheduled tasks. You could do some memory things. You can check the threads. You could also see some garbage collection which is going on your application. Now, there is also a story behind it. Let's see if I can cover that up. Let's go to the application. It's still running. All right, so this is, let's say, the basic interface of the application in itself, wherein you could see there is health status, you could see there is process, there are threads, which you can see how much threads your application is consuming, how many garbage collection pauses the application has done so far, what's the memory, what's the non-heap memory. You can actually go now to the metrics. Now in metrics, it's really easy to define what you really want. Do you want to see how many executor pool are going on? What are the Hikari CP connections which are required? Just add the metrics. What is the application start time? You could add the process start.time, how much time it really took to start. You can see how many JDBC connections are active, how many are, let's say, idle. So you could see that really quick. What is the CPU usage? So now this, again, there are applications, but when it comes to boiling down the issue at the pod level or at the virtual machine level, this is very handy. You don't really need to go to a lot of places just to get this information. You can deep dive into it, and this is, let's say, the very prima interface to your application. There are no much connectors. It's just the client talking to the server, giving all of this information in the actuator endpoints, and you could see it over here. There is more. Of course, you can explore the JVM info and whatnot. You can see what's the vendor. I'm using an Eclipse Adoptium. You can see the version. As we saw, I'm also using 17, which is the now recent favorite of all. Now, along with the, let's say, monitoring, what we also have in place is another application problem. So a lot of times we ship code. We have issues going on in and around. And whenever we get a call, someone says, hey, what happened? What really happened? When was the last build done on, let's say your user acceptance test area? Did it really successfully roll up to all 40 pods on Kubernetes? Who did it? What is the tag deployed? Was it done on blue or green or both? All these questions keep on coming whenever you have distributed applications. Now, to manage them, sometimes it's easier said than done, but what we tried to do is, and when I said it's not just the Spring Boot server, how we are leveraging it. What we did is, so there is a very famous actuator info endpoint. We used a plugin called Git Commit plugin, which I'll just show in the next slide. We added all the information with respect to your release. Let's say, what is the application name? What is the commit ID? What was the last commit from your Jira? What was the email? When was it done? So we actually leveraged that plugin, and we plug and played all that information into your actuator info. Now, how it works is that you can simply add the git info goal over here in your application. Now, once you build your application, it will generate a git.properties file. Now, the git.properties file is picked up by the actuator info, and once you do that, you have all these, let's say, pretty messages flowing around in your info. Now, this is easy for you to do in any of your applications. Whenever you have Git control, you can actually do that. I said it's helpful in case of structured and, let's say, distributed microservices. Because many a times what happens, as much as we love Kubernetes, pods, we need to be really sure if all of my pods really got the recent application or not. Did it really roll out to the 42nd pod or not? So we're also trying to build around it. So this is, let's say, a single pod view. In upcoming time, we are focusing on having an aggregated view for this, wherein we would be combining all of this information and giving, let's say, a gorgeous UI, as Spring Boot IO now has, that you can see how many are there on what branch, and if there is a difference in branch, because at times, pods restart. And that was one of the story I was going to tell about an application we debugged using the simple metrics and monitoring. So the thing is, you could say, hey, give me 50 pods. But behind the 50 pods, there is a virtual machine. Now, the art and craft of Kubernetes is that it will say, OK, but it seldom or it sometimes forgets what is the EC2 instance or the cloud instance powering it up. So in our application, we saw that every time we are saying, hey, 2 microns per pod. But when we actually visited our application and we saw those pods, we saw in the Spring Boot, let's say, admin, we saw, hey, it was only 0.5. But you promised me 2 microns. So of course, there will be flapping of the ecosystem. The application will give you certain issues, which will be very, very hard to figure out. But with this, it was helpful. I'll not say you can do it only via this. There are different lens and whatnot tools built over top of Kubernetes. But this really, helped change the game. OK, so I think we all celebrate whenever we push things to production. We always, let's say, pop up our champagne whenever things go live. But seldom after 2 to 3 weeks, imagine you get a call from your DevOps engineer saying, hey, Jatin, you're getting a lot of memory issues. Now, if you have been developing long enough, coding long enough, you would have faced that issue that, hey, your application is having memory issues. Now, of course, memory is like, as compared to CPUs, it's not that costly. But of course, a memory leak is a memory leak. Now, for memory leaks to be debugged, you need dumps. Now, there are different ways to get dumps. You could actually instantiate, let's say, heap dump out of memory error whenever you're starting or pointing it to the bin. You could use your service JMap so that you can always dump your application heap dumps. The third, and which is connected to the Spring Boot server, is also the actuator heap dump endpoint. Now, you could actually use this endpoint, but you have to be careful. Because when you are fetching your memory from different applications, it also costs, let's say, some energy on your application. When you're downloading a bigger heap dump, it will cost you. So you have to be very wise, you have to be very calculative when you're doing that. Otherwise, yes, if you are confident, you are good to go, you can actually simply go to, let's say, over here. Let's go to the JVM. You go to the heap dumps. So as I said, it also warns you, right? It says a heap dump may consist sensitive data. So please handle with care. But I don't care for now, so I'll just simply download it. So here you go. You have the heap dump. It's 66 MB. I think the internet is pretty good. So you can get that in a, let's say, second. Of course, it will not happen for your applications which are quite mature. This was just a sample application. I was not really messing up with the memory. But after that, of course, you can analyze using hprof and whatnot. And if you are, let's say, into the system from some time, and you might have also heard of a tool, JVisualVM. So that's also a way to get and analyze your, let's say, heap dumps. Now, be mindful of the resources. That's the takeaway. Explore the best ways. If Spring Boot admin is your way, go ahead. But otherwise, you can you can choose your own poison when it comes to the heap dumps. Now, another one is thread dumps. So thread dumps are useful when you have to see how much CPU are you utilizing. These issues are hard to debug, hard to fix, but it's really quicker to get the thread dump. Now, if I go to the application, I can again show you how easily and quickly I can take the thread dump. So it's really gorgeous. So I'll wait for a few seconds so that it can take what's really going on right now in your application. Now, this is for one instance. If you have to do it for multiple instances, you have to select the instance and then download it so that it gives you a proper thread dump for a particular pod or particular EC2 machine, whichever you want to do that. So in lieu of time, I'll just click on the download thread. So yeah, it gives me a text file, which is all good. I can open it, I can analyze what's going on in that, and then you can see what's really blocking your threads. Now, threads are really important in bigger applications, especially now we are going into the GenAI thing, so we also need to be mindful how much threads we use, how many instances we use when dealing with those API keys. I'll turn back to the application. So this is giving me a hard time. I need to switch. I have to exit this. Okay. Okay. Now, we talked about feature flags. We talked about log level management. We saw how we can actually automate and leverage and increase the test coverage. But this is not the end. So there are more cases to it. There is more than what meets the eye. So this is also a way wherein we found out that I can make my properties refreshable and see how I can come to timeouts and TTL. So when you're working with different applications, it's often that you need to manage the cache. It's also how you can see what API request is taking and what's the magic number. So whenever you go to production, you need to see what's the magic number for a particular API. Seldom we have seen that for the order management or for the shipping, which usually talks to a third party, it takes a lot of time to, let's say, to load. So you have to agree on what's good, whether 3 seconds is good, Whether 5 seconds is good or maybe 15 seconds is good, because hey, you have to launch. In different tenants, in different sublevels, you have to calculate what's that. Same goes for DB read timeout, DB connection issues. Whenever you are facing, you have to see how much is enough, how much is really needed, and then you can come to your own sweet magic number for that. Now, I'll show that really quick into deep diving a little bit into the code aspect of it. So, okay, so let's say I was talking about, so I have different APIs, I have different endpoints, now I have different tenants. Now, as I said, every tenant is important, every tenant is useful, so you can define even for application time, what is the connection timeout. So there can be requests from your, let's say, customers or end users that, hey, please increase the timeout, I'm experimenting with something. Now, that doesn't really mean that you have to do deployments, you have to change the code, or you have to take a lot of permissions, but it could be done over a simple Jira ticket. That, hey, for X duration, I'm going to set it 20 seconds for you. After 3 hours, I'll restart the application through a scheduler, and then it's gone. So you could actually configure API as well, like API request with different timeouts. What you can also do is, depending upon, so as I was explaining, right, for the product order, it even took 35 seconds in some tenants. So I can do that, but of course, not on, let's say, not on production every time. When it comes to caching, so using Spring, using application properties, we also made it configurable, and I'm doing 2 things here. So one is toggling it on and off. Let's say it's my product listing page, wherein it's e-commerce. Then there is, let's say, product detail page, wherein I want to have it enabled or disabled. That's one thing. Second is also the time to live. So do I want to make it live for 600 seconds? Do I want it for forever, like a day or more than that? So I can change that, and that is usually helpful, again, coming to a magic number. So how long do you really need the cache for? Do you want to cache it for 15 minutes before the price changes, and let's say in your backend systems? Do you want it for 2 hours because nobody is changing today? It's a public holiday today. I think it's a public holiday in Germany, so no one is going to bother about it. Let's not do that. So you can actually play around with this as per your use case and things. Now, this is also, let's say, not the only thing which you could do. You could also come back to the circuit breaker. Now, you could open a circuit breaker on a rainy day at, let's say, 3 seconds, but you also might have to do it after 20 seconds in some cases. So using Spring Boot Server, you could also make it refreshable. You can alter, like, when should it sleep? What is the error threshold percentage? You could make it configurable and again reload it. Now again, you could reload it using manual efforts. You can make some endpoints. You could create some pipelines in CI/CD even to do that. That, hey, for a given day, I'm going to be very mindful of my circuit breaker. I'll not really open it because I'm expecting it's a Euro Cup coming up. There will be a lot of traffic. Let's hold that thought. Don't give me a lot of errors tonight because the application is going to do that. So this is how you can actually go and configure a lot of things when it comes to different areas, circuit break configs. So leverage as much as you can, cache on, cache off, a lot of things, different APIs. Don't say no to your customers because that's how we pay our bills, right? So you develop something, you add features, and that's how the ship moves always. Now, this is, let's say, almost the last leg wherein we will talk about Spring Boot admin at scale. So at times we have heard, hey, Spring Boot admin is good for your local machine, or maybe it's good for only 2 pods, but that's not the case. So this is one sample screenshot which I could take. You can see my name on the top, on the left. I also have access to it. That also governs the very fact that we are able to control the security aspects of it. So you can see there are more than 15, 20 microservices deployed, and it's working. So you have, and it's not even the peak time. It's 374 instances, 24 applications, all up. So I am able to run it at scale. but that's not just that easy. So you had to learn a lot of things around how we could connect with the Kubernetes API, how we could set IAM roles in order to do that, because I'll be talking a lot to the Kubernetes APIs and get the status of it, whether it's okay, it's not healthy, is it needing more, let's say, CPU, or what's the memory going on over there. So that's one part. Second, as I said, security. So as you saw, I gave you a lot of examples you could tweak the application. Now let's say if it's in someone's hand who doesn't really understand what is going on in the application. If I instantly move my users to legacy, all the users will crash. So you have to define your access control mechanism. And with that, what we did is we introduced security and access control. We use key clock. So key clock is another IAM. So with that, what we again analyze is, what is Spring Boot server? It's a Spring Boot application. It has its own endpoints. Can I restrict these endpoints to a particular level or access control? Yes, and that's what we did. We found out there are endpoints. Let's say there is a refresh endpoint, there is a heap dump endpoint, and what we did is we defined different security protocols on it. So again, I'll switch and show one such thing at the code. Let's go to the server. Let's open this up. I've not integrated it by machine over here. Yeah. So as you can see, with different matchers, I am able to restrict it to different roles. So for example, a simple user could actually just go and check what's going on, see the, let's say, health of it, the insights of it. But any other user would actually have to have some more roles. Let's say I'm having an admin role, I'm having an environment edit role, or I could have, let's say, a config refresh role. So depending upon that, refining the matchers, we are able to control the behavior of Spring Boot server and how we can give it to different users, and to whom we don't want to, we'll just restrict that. And this is aptly, let's say, shown over here that, hey, I have a service admin, a basic role to access Spring Boot admin, get information like environment, configurations. You can see the beans, that's fine at level 1, but you can't really get the thread dump, or you can't really get the heap dump, because that's costly and you don't really know what you need at times. So if you knew, you can just ask for that service level and you could get that. But if you don't need it, don't just extend it. The simple rule, chew whatever is really your cup of thing, right? Now, we also have certain roles around environment edit. So whenever I was talking to key clock as well, and I was doing the automation, we also need to create clients for that. Because you just cannot do a simple login on interface, but you have to extend it. You have to generate tokens, and even for tokens, you can get those roles associated. Now, that actually brings up to the mark that, hey, yes, Spring Boot admin is scalable. It can work with security protocols, and you can leverage as much as you can. So if you haven't used Spring Boot server yet, you have not used the Spring Boot admin, I really say that you're missing out things. It could really ease out your life as a developer, as a PO as well, or as a test engineer, wherein you want to leverage a lot of things. I think that would be really helpful. And thanks a lot. That was me. And if you got any questions, we could definitely catch up over a coffee or beer at the end. And that's my credentials. I try to be active on Twitter whenever there is a conference time, but otherwise, it's more of LinkedIn. That's the universal mode, or let's say the universally accepted medium. So once again, thanks a lot for your time, and I hope I catch you in different sessions and whatnot.